Hello everybody, my name is Sniper's Fun. I welcome you all back to my next top 10 list here on YouTube. This time, I'm going to be talking about my favorite Disney movies. Most importantly, my favorite 2D classic Disney movies. The older Disney movies before they started going mostly 3D, mostly with the Pixar stuff in recently the last 10 or so years. The old classics that a lot of us grew up with. This is nothing to say about me hating the 3D movies now or Pixar or whatever. It is like that. No, it's not like that. Those will eventually one day probably be their own separate list. I just wanted to kind of tackle the old 2D classic Disney movies because, that's what I grew up with. That's what a lot of us grew up with. And a lot of these movies, the older ones especially, are a lot more memorable to us because that's like what we grew up with as like kids, like the stuff we became fans of, years ago when we first got into watching Disney and all that. And I wanted to give my appreciation to the Disney company for all these years of all these great movies, all these movies I grew up with that made my childhood, made my life the way it is, my view on animation the way it is, outside of, other cartoons I've came across through Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, Disney and anime and all that other stuff. Disney was one of the major animation companies that I grew up with. And it has made my love for animation, my love for cartoons, and throughout my entire life. And I wanted to give my respect and give my attention and love to the old 2D classic Disney movies of yesteryear and give you guys my top 10 favorite classic 2D Disney movies. Now, before I get started, quickly, I want to mention this right here, right now, for this top 10 list and my future top 10 list. After the whole debacle and craziness of trying to upload my top 10 video game ideas I wanted to do, and it was separated into 3 parts and so on and so forth, and that video was like 20 minutes and like 10, 17 some odd minutes for part 3, and having a long time and taking forever to talk about it. From now on, I'm going to actually be doing my top 10 lists in a way where either A, they're going to be short enough to be shorter than a lot of my previous top 10 lists. All my major 20 to 30 minute top 10 lists, it's pretty much dead. I'm not going to try to do it as much in the future because I'm going to want to try to, unless it's a major list, something really important. So either A, you're going to be seeing shorter lists from me, or B, I will, if it is a longer list, I will be splitting it up into 2 parts. And only 2 parts, unless my mouth talks 50 miles a minute and I go on for hours. Which I don't want to, but I'm just letting you guys know. All my recently top 10 lists, I haven't really timed myself. I haven't really I didn't really pace myself out as much, so I'm not going to want to do that in coming lists. I'm going to try to time myself better. Just want to let you guys know that. And if there is multiple parts, it's going to be or a longer video in general, it's going to be for a major list. Just want to let you guys know that. Now, before this video goes on too long, here are my top 10 favorite 2D animated Disney movies. Let's get on started with number 10. Number 10 goes to Tarzan. Now, Tarzan was a pretty good movie. It has nice animation, nice story and characters. The classic, novelization, the story of Tarzan brought to life by Disney. Phil Collins did the music. You have Tarzan as the main hero with Jane, and then Clayton, and all these humans coming into the wild, trying to take the gorillas and stuff like that. Tarzan obviously losing his parents as a baby, being raised by gorillas and becoming the king of the jungle and stuff like that. A classic story that the book was written many hundreds of years, a long time ago. Was finally brought to life, Now, it was brought to life on the big screen before by multiple different, companies before, and since it has had a live-action movie recently. But, Disney took their swing at it in the late 90s. And it was a good movie. I really did like it. More so at the time. I do still like it now. But it is a classic still, in my opinion, because it's it brings the book to life. It has interesting characters and story. And the atmosphere, seeing the jungle, had many really good art to it. And to say, quite frankly, just like I said, it had art to it. And it did have emotional parts, seeing Tarzan grow up and be like, oh, I'm different than these gorillas, and him having to find his place in the wild, and then meeting humans for his first time in his life, when he was older and having to, okay, he's a human now. He is obviously a human, so him getting used to that life, which he never grew up with, and seeing the conflict in these two lives and how obviously humans can be just as vicious as the animals, and like them trying to take over the wilderness and the animals and the gorillas and him fighting back and just all that stuff. And whatever you want to say about Phil Collins, I do really like the Phil Collins music in this. It really did add to it, although maybe like it could have been more atmospheric. I remember here when I were watching the review from the Nostalgia Critic, it could have been more atmospheric, like a kind of like a not as like cartoony, for lack of a better term, out there. Basically, it could have been more atmospheric, like showing him with less Phil Collins. But I think the cartooniness of it, like the comedy of it, mixed with the action, with the Phil Collins music, I think made it a classic. And that's my opinion right there. I still do love it. It's why it's my number 10. Now, my number 9 on this list is going to be Lilo and Stitch. A more recent one. I think it was 2002 when this one came out. It's like the most modern Disney movie we've ever actually seen. Like, almost a current day. It had like licensed music like Elvis in it. It had space with meeting like Earth, and Stitch is awesome and Lilo is awesome, and just seeing how like troubled life Lilo has living with her sister and the loss of their parents, and then having Stitch as a pet, and then all the alien world coming down to try to collect him, and just this unification of family. That family isn't just usually biological, but also could be just who you're connected to and stuff like that. The animation looks nice. It's simplistic but yet detailed, and the scenery looks nice. And it may be a recent one, but it did touch me a bit, because it's like it can be emotional, but it can be action oriented. It can be comedic but serious, and it kind of tackles all that at once, like at multiple different points of the movie, but it tackles it all like in one movie. And it's as recent as it is, which is not really recent much anymore because it's been like 14 years. It is a classic, and a movie that I think will stand the test of time, as modern as it is, because Elvis music will live on forever, and so on and so forth, and all the stuff they've done since then, all the shows and extra spin-off movies, I think kind of show that, and the love for it, especially and also the music, like Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride. And that's the reason why I love it. It's just a good movie, just to sit down and just watch. That's my number 9. Here is my number 8. Emperor's New Groove. Just a whole wacky adventure between, with Kuzco and Yzma and Kronk, and all these characters just coming together, the spoiled brat of Emperor, having to kind of learn, there's more to life than just him being the Emperor and him being, like his way of life and him taking over everything, and like learning the value of life, technically. And this wacky adventure he goes on with Hacha, and just this buddy movie of them traveling back to the thing, him being turned into a llama, and just this fantasy-esque world. And if for one thing you want to remember the movie for, it's Kronk. Kronk, besides, like, every character made the movie, but if there's one character specifically that made this movie as awesome as it was, it's Kronk. And it's the reason why it's my number 8. It's not one of my favorite ones. I did love it. It's lower on the list, but it still is one of my top favorites for its comedy and for its semi-action it has in the story and the characters and the character development and the art. And the voice acting, they got a lot of good voice actors in there. Like David Spade is actually quite good, despite what people probably would want to say. He actually made Kuzco really an interesting character, especially his personality. So that's really about it. That's my number 8. So my number 7 on this list is going to go to Treasure Planet, where you basically have it's a futuristic adaptation of the classic Treasure Island book, with in space. Instead of them looking for just a distinct treasure on buried like pirates and everything, it's a planet that has treasure. I think it was a unique concept. Some people probably want to just have seen an actual treasure island, and quite frankly, I kind of want to too. Maybe in the future, Like, it seems like Disney's diving back into a lot of these stories they did back in the day. Maybe one day we'll see a new, like a 3D animated or a live action, which they've already done back then, but maybe a modern day live action or a 3D, like Brave type style, you know, Treasure Island. But on the top of the Treasure Planet, you have Jim Hawkins traveling with John Silver the pirate. Him on this adventure, he wants to find this planet because this is this legend that he never thought was true, and he's going to go search for it. And he works his way on his crew, which is filled with pirates, and it's taken over, and he has to fight pirates and find this planet and prove himself. And it's kind of a coming of age story because at the beginning he's kind of a semi-bratty kid, and he evolves as the story goes. And the art looks really nice in this movie, especially all the scenery of space, because you can do a lot with space, and it really, is awesome. And then you have like John Resnick's song, like "I'm Still Here" and all that, and it's like that. And when that played when his father left in the scene, I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this for you, but I'm gonna just say it right now that I'm talking about the general story of each movie, so. Like, it's kind of emotional there because you see where he came from as a younger age, which kind of led to him being like that kind of kid at the beginning, which then you kind of see him evolve from. It was just a nice movie. It's a modern day classic from them, and it's a movie that is so underrated. And I also want to see it in Kingdom Hearts. It's a movie that deserves more recognition than it gets. That's my number 7. My number 6 is going to go to The Little Mermaid because it's a freaking classic and has nice music and has nice scenery, and Ursula's an awesome villain, one of Disney's best villains. Poor unfortunate souls. And it's just a really nice classic movie that's a simplistic story of the telling of The Little Mermaid and Disney's adaptation of it. And what else can you say, really? And like, it's just a nice movie. It's really all it is. It's a Disney classic, and if you've not seen it now, go out and watch it. Rent it, if you still rent, or buy it. Or I'm sure you've seen it. It might be on Netflix or something now, some sort of service. Just watch it. It's a Disney classic. I don't have to really say any more beyond that. Than it's a Disney classic.